I have been struggling to find the words to even start to make this video. This is a project which has been a struggle. It was so much of a struggle that I've actually avoided making this video until now. Hello everyone, I'm Matt, this is Model Minutes, and join me today as I build and review the Curtiss-Wright AT-9 Jeep from Dora Wings. Let's get this one down onto the workbench. So before I get into the build, I just want to do like a little bit of a caveat. This is a project which some people would say it's a short run kit, it's limited run. You can't go into it expecting wonders. And I bought this one and thought it would be a nice, quick, cheap build. Well, it's not necessarily cheap, but you know, quick and fun to do for a group build that we did recently on my Discord server. And it just turned out to be anything but. It looked quite nice. I did an unboxing and it looked quite nice, and I thought, oh, that's, you know, that would be nice to build. But then as soon as I started gluing stuff together, I started to realize that things were just not going to be as nice and simple as I had hoped. I have got another Dora Wings kit which looks to be much better. It's more recent, and I think I expected it to be like that, but unfortunately this was my first experience of building a Dora Wings kit and it just didn't vibe for me. But yeah, let's get into this one. As usual, I'll be cutting away the parts that I need from the sprue using my cutters or perhaps a sharp knife. There are little bits here and there that do need cleaning up, so a sanding stick or a sharp knife can be used to do this. I want to use up my Humbrol liquid poly, and I thought this would be a good project for this. And I started off by assembling the interior cockpit parts. This is when I discovered one of the first things that I didn't like about this kit, and that is that there aren't really any locating marks for virtually any of the parts. It looks like there are, but they're actually really shallow and not particularly present, so everything is kind of like just press fit and you have to let the glue do the work. There are some small details as well which I really question why they weren't just moulded on to the relevant parts. There is some photo etch included in this kit which is extra value, and in the relevant places I will glue this on with some super glue. But again, I do have to wonder how much value some of this photo etch adds, as some of these details could have just been moulded on as surface details. I continue to build up the interior cockpit components, and the cockpit does look to be reasonably well detailed. There is a photo etched control panel, and you have to add a photo etch set of rudder pedals to this. There is technically a plastic injection molded set of rudder pedals, but in my example they seem to be short shot, and I think that they may all be short shot, which is why they included a photo etch set as well. Some photo etch seat belts are in the set, and these were carefully added onto the seats. And with the majority of the cockpit details now assembled, they were added inside of the cockpit. And this swings back to that comment I made just now about how nothing really seems to align. It's all like press fit or flush fit. Nothing has like a positive join, and you kind of have to just guess that it's in the right place, which can cause problems later on because you'll have gaps in places. With that done, there are some sort of internal cockpit parts which need to go inside of the fuselage, and these are just the details for the insides of the cockpit walls. And then when that was done, I didn't actually bother to prime it, I just went straight in with this interior green from Outlaw. This was airbrushed onto all of the internal components which I've now assembled. After this, some Vallejo black was used to pick out some various details inside of the cockpit, including the control panel. This gloss red from Humbrol was used on the fire extinguisher on the rear bulkhead. I painted the seat belts on the chairs with Vallejo buff. This was done carefully with a fine brush, and then Vallejo silver would be used to pick out the buckles and the nozzle on the fire extinguisher. Humbrol 01 Primer Grey would be dry brushed onto the interior cockpit areas to help bring out all of those details. I then glued into position the two chairs and glued the cockpit assembly inside one of the fuselage halves. I then joined together the other fuselage half. This was a little bit fiddly and I had to apply pressure to make sure that the bond was nice and solid. Inside of the cockpit canopy there is this small component which needs to be glued in, and now I'm going to turn my attention to the seams. So I've got some putty surfacer from Ammo MiG which was painted along the seams. They're not particularly tidy, there is a bit of a gap, and this should help fill them in. When this was dry, these seams would be sanded nice and smooth. I then moved on to glue into place the doors, which are clear parts, and you could technically display these doors open if you wanted to. The only thing here is the fit is not quite perfect, and it did take a little bit of fiddling to get it looking reasonable. This was then followed by the main canopy, and again the same kind of issue. Things don't quite fit perfectly. With that done, I'm going to move on to the other parts of the aircraft that need to be built up, such as the tail surfaces, and these come in a number of components. Generally, the design is that they are in two halves and are joined together, and then can be added into place. But in this case, I found that the mounting holes were not quite the right size and I had to drill them out. You'll be able to notice that I have actually positioned the elevators in a drooping position. The rudder is the same and that comes in two halves which had to be glued together. And once that was done, it was added onto the tail. This front part of the aircraft can be added. You do get a different part to replicate a slightly different variant, depending on the paint scheme that you've chosen. And now I turn my attention to the wings. The wings again come in a number of parts, with the upper wing surfaces having to be joined to the lower wing surfaces. When that's done, the ailerons can also be added. The main fuselage can be glued onto the wings, and again the fit is a little bit questionable. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the landing gear. If I had to say anything about the landing gear, I would say that it's overcomplicated. It's over-engineered for what you need it to do. There are lots of small little parts which have to be joined together, and whilst it does make the landing gear look quite impressive, it really brings into question how sturdy it will be. With the landing gear leg components assembled, these then get glued into the landing gear bays. The landing gear bays are separate entities which will have to be installed inside of the wing, and this will cause a little bit of a problem. The way that Dora wings have designed this mean that you assemble your landing gear into a landing gear bay, and then this goes into a nacelle which goes into the wing. And it's a little bit hard to sort of explain this, but normally you have an aircraft wing and the landing gear like this, and when you put the weight on the wing, the landing gear pushes in and it's solid. Whereas in this case they've made sort of a bay, and a landing gear goes into the bay like this, but the bay is glued onto the wing at the lower end, so when weight is put through the landing gear it actually separates it from the wing, which I found to be very frustrating. It seemed to be like an unnecessary complicated design. And actually during the assembly of this I had the landing gear bay separate from the engine nacelle a couple of times, and I had to try and fix that. After some struggling with the landing gear, I moved on to the tail wheel, which again the hole had to be opened up and fiddled with in order to get it in the right place. I will add the actual wheel later, I'll leave that off until I have painted it. There are a few little details like these steps which need to be added to the lower side of the aircraft, and some little probes and sensors that have to be glued into the wings. And I think this is the aerial mast which needs to be glued on the top of the canopy. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the engines, and once again the engines seem to be over-engineered and over-complicated. There are quite a few parts that make up these engines. And whilst they kind of build up in a logical way, I found this to be somewhat overcomplicated and a bit unnecessary. Especially given that in a minute, you'll be able to see that not a lot of this engine is actually visible. This engine even has the mounting struts to add it onto the engine nacelle. And unless you were going to leave the engine cowlings off, hardly any of this detail is going to be visible. Speaking of the engine cowlings, they come in a few parts which need to be glued together. And it was a bit of a struggle to get these into place around the engine which we've just assembled. Again, the fit of the parts is a little bit questionable and I have got a few gaps. The propellers need to have the central shaft drilled out in order for the mounting pin to be inserted. And once again, there are some small details on here which need to be included. On the lower side of the wing, I've painted the landing gear lights in silver, and now I'm going to add the clear parts into their holes. Fortunately, this kit does come with vinyl masks included for the clear parts, and these were really quite nice. It was a simple process to peel them off the backing paper and stick them onto the relevant panels. I'm going to move on to some painting now, and the interior green that I used earlier is going to be the first thing to be used. And this was sprayed onto the cockpit canopy area. This should hopefully make the interior side of the canopy framework look green if you look through the windows later. After this, I used this RAF white on the engine cowlings. This is going to be my base colour for the next layer of paint. The paint scheme I've chosen has blue cowlings, so I'm going to use this Vallejo Model Air French Blue. The white base colour, which I've already used, should make this nice and vibrant. I then masked the blue areas and sprayed on the yellow. This Outlaw Yellow is another lacquer based paint, and a couple of layers would be built up over the top of any overspray of the blue to get a good opacity. Now I'm going to base colour the rest of the aircraft, having masked the blue and the yellow. I mixed up some Outlaw Black and some Outlaw Gloss to make a more of a gloss black kind of primer colour. This was simply sprayed over the entire aircraft. I would, however, use the black without any gloss to paint the wheels and the propellers. Next up, I've got this metal coat polished aluminium from Humbrol. I think this is actually the last of the tin, and I think I've got enough just to finish off this aircraft. This was sprayed over the aircraft, and that black gloss layer should help make this metal colour a little bit more vibrant. I had totally forgotten about walkways though, and I should have masked them before I sprayed the silver, so I had to mask the silver and then spray the walkways. And with that done, I'm going to move on to the decals. So you get a number of different paint schemes to choose from in this kit, and I selected the relevant transfers from the decal sheet for the one that I wanted to do. They were then dipped into warm water to release them from the backing paper. And if you'd like to get your hands on your own brush water mug so you don't get mixed up with your cup of tea, check out my merch store. It helps support the channel. I'm going to be using my normal setting solutions for this, Microset and Sol. First up, Microset in the blue bottle is painted onto the area of the kit where the decal is going to go. The decal was then slid into position, and later on some Microsol from the red bottle can be added on the top to further soften the transfer into the surface of the kit. The decal's actually probably one of the best parts of this build. I had absolutely no problem applying them, and in the finished build they look really good. There's like no visible decal film. When that was done, I clear coated the aircraft with some satin clear, which should help protect those transfers. Next up, I'm going to use some gunmetal paint. This was carefully painted onto the inside of the engines. Then some silver was painted onto the centres of the propellers, and also carefully onto the hubs of the wheels. Humbrol number 99, which is a lemon colour, was used on the tips of the propeller blades just to let the ground crew know where those dangerous spinny bits are. And now I can add the wheels onto their relevant landing gear legs, and then the propellers onto their engines, but once again the hole had to be drilled out. I don't believe the propellers are designed to freely rotate in this, they are kind of press fit. With that, I removed the vinyl masks from the windows, and they seem to have done a pretty good job. There is a small clear part which needs to go on the hole at the top of the aircraft, and this was added here. And to add a finishing touch, some Infini Superfine Black Lycra was superglued onto the tail, and then stretched over to the aerial mast. A little more superglue would keep this in place, and the excess material would be cut away. And that's as far as I'm going to go with this build of the Dora Wings AT-9 Jeep in 1/48 scale. Well, I'm glad that it's now finished. It's at a point where I'm going to call it done, but I'm sure you could see from that there was a lot of stuff that had to happen. There's just lots of little bits and pieces that, you know, need drilling out to make things fit, or seams that need cleaning up. One of the things that I noticed about this kit as well is that it doesn't join parts like on the edge. It will actually just join it halfway down the middle, which creates another seam which I had to fill in other places too. So the design of this kit is a bit questionable. There are lovely features of this kit, the level of detail is quite nice, but there are details which could have just been molded into the surface of something, like those little dials or wheels. They could just be molded details. I don't need them as separate photo etch parts. There were actually more photo etch parts included, which I just didn't bother adding because I didn't think they would add any extra value to the build. So yeah, this kit, I wasn't a massive fan. It caused problems for me. People will say, oh, you know, but it's limited run, it's short run, they aren't always good kits, you need to go into them expecting to, you know, try or work a bit harder. But I didn't know that they were short run because it doesn't really tell you that on the box. And also my question is, why do short run kits have to be worse than normal kits, especially when you're paying potentially more for them? And I'm sure there are short run kits out there which are wonderful and fantastic and, you know, put normal long life or long production run kits to shame. But this one unfortunately wasn't the best. The design of the parts in some places was questionable, and I just didn't really enjoy it. I think some of the good features of this kit are, as we mentioned, the level of detail is really quite nice, although a lot of it you can't see in the finished build, and also you get photo etch and you get masks included, and also the decals. Actually, I was really happy with the decals. The decals were really nice. But for a first experience of Dora Wings, unfortunately, this might put me off getting more in the future. However, I have heard that they're not all like this one, and it may just be that this one, in this particular case, wasn't necessarily quite the right choice. As I'm sure there probably will be better kits in the range, and I have got that Vanguard to have a go at, and I'll be interested to see if it is an improvement as it is a more recent tooling. So talking about the tooling then, this is actually a 2021 tooling, and this release dates from then as well. To the best of my knowledge, there haven't been any other different boxings of this kit, so pretty much they're all going to be the same. A good thing about this kit is that you do actually get 4 paint schemes included, and they are a little bit different to each other, some of them. So they don't all feature the same kind of thing. And you get a fair amount of parts, 128 plastic parts with 26 photo etched. But as mentioned, some of these parts are just kind of unnecessary and just extra details that could otherwise have been moulded on. I paid £27.99 for my kit, so let's call that 28, and it seems to be sort of in line with 1/48 scale kits of this sort of size and complexity, and that kind of price does seem to be the most consistent one that I can find online, but prices do vary wildly. If you really wanted one of these kits, and given the problems that I've encountered with it, I would be tempted to say maybe look for one that's a little bit cheaper. I do keep a log of everything that I do inside of my journal, the journal being a book I have specifically created to help me keep a log of everything that I do. And if you'd like to keep a log of your own builds, you can actually get these on Amazon, and it helps support the channel. But in here, I'm just looking through. This one took me a couple of days. I think it's about 4 or 5 days to complete this one, and I worked fairly solidly on this one. Generally, I do try and fit it between work, but I think I might have had some time off, so I focused a little bit more heavily on this one. But it just, yeah, one of the notes I've just written in here is that it looks really cool when it's finished, but it just fought me. It just put up a fight during the majority of the build. And on that, I think we're going to call it here. This is a kit which I was excited to build and then ended up not really enjoying. And to the point where I really sort of procrastinated in making this video. But it's all done now, and I hope that you've enjoyed my journey through this modelling project that really caused me a few headaches. But with that, I'm going to leave this one here. Thank you so much to my Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel. If you'd like to join these Model Club members on the screen here and find out the perks that you get by joining the Model Club, check out the links in the description. There are other ways to help support the channel if you'd like to do so, and full information is below the video. If, however, you enjoy this kind of content and would like to see more of it, make sure you subscribe with notifications on so that you never miss a modelling upload. Finally though, from me here on the workbench today, it's a massive thank you to you for watching this one. I'm going to go and find a more enjoyable kit to build, and I will see you all again next time. Where even is it? Where have I put it? It's down here. There it is. That's what we wanted. Good, found it. And I need to shut the window. What colour is that? Buff, I think. Dora wings, AT-9 Jeep. Ow, that was loud. I forgot.